broken rear facade was mentioned, as well as the light impacts to neighbors, wanting night shades for to reduce impacts of lighting from the office to the residential neighbors behind. Too many competing elements and lack of vocabulary and readability. So the applicant has made a number of revisions to the plan. I'll kind of briefly go through those. I'm sure they will give a much more detailed presentation showing you how they've changed the project. So they've reintroduced the richer ceramic quartz tile material at the first and second floors of the building to improve the building's skin and address some of the aesthetic concerns. Reduce some of the glazing at the first and second floors on the front and rear of the building with the introduction of vertical bands of the ceramic quartz tile material. Wall and vertical mullion placement is related to the third floor plan above. The retail entry doors were located within the solid vertical walls. They removed the 3-story curved entry tower element, so there's no longer a DEE for height, and replaced it with a 2-story squared up form with glass corner to correspond with the design of the other corners of the building. They reduced the open tower element at the third floor by recessing it back from the lower floors. The elevator tower was accentuated with the ceramic quartz tile material at both the interior and exterior. And they added ground floor entry canopy to announce the entry for the residential and office uses. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation. Thank you.
Great. We'll have 10 minutes for your presentation, and everything working all right? Great. Thank you.
All right, Elena Campagna of Stecker and Northway Architects. I will try to keep this, since we've seen this. Can you hear me?
We're not getting much volume.
All right, can you hear me now? All right. Okay, since you have seen this before and are very familiar with it, I will try to keep it brief and just stick to what has changed. Just to remind you, this is the previous design, which you... Oh, sorry. Okay, I will try to keep it brief and stick to just what has changed since the last time you saw this. Here's the previous design, just to remind you what you disliked. The main issues we were to resolve was the no curved or 3-story high entry tower design. You wanted a more cohesive design. We had too much glass at the commercial facades. You wanted us to introduce more vertical elements, and the removal of all the stone was detrimental to the building, and you were hoping that we could put some back in a more appropriate way. Here's our proposed building design. The main changes: we now have a 2-story square entry lobby with an added entrance canopy, a more dynamic version of the retail canopies. The third floor was substantially reduced in height and bulk. We pulled it back from the lower floors, trying to visually divorce it from those lower floors. The architecture of that third floor lobby is now in keeping with the third floor itself. And we also have an exterior balcony on the third floor that allows for some plants right above that main entry as well. The corner glass vocabulary we have now taken into the entry into the main lobby space. So now we're using that same theme at the lobby space all the way up all 3 floors. And we have also done a more subtle version of the corner glass theme on the third floor at 3 key corner units, where we've brought some windows into the corners and added horizontal mullions in those windows to unify the whole building. We've also added vertical wall sections on both the front and rear commercial facades. Do I have a pointer here? Oh, sorry. Here we go. Here we've added walls here and over here. Sorry. So over by the garage, there's a wall. Over here we've added a vertical wall. Here we've added a vertical wall on the front. And now stone is used for the main section of the 2-story kind of commercial facade that goes along Paige Mill. It starts over here by the lobby and wraps all the way around this volume along Paige Mill and returns and goes up the side of the stair on the south side. So that entire volume is all stone. There we go. DEEs, we now have 2 DEs. We removed the height DE. The whole building is 35 feet. Only the elevator tower is 40 feet, and that's allowed by code. And again, to recap, the 2 DEs we have remaining are related to the fact that we had to push the building and the basement parking level below back 3 feet to allow for street trees per the city's request. Site and first floor plan. We changed the lobby plans to square. We shifted one of the retail doors towards the main entrance, and that allowed us to redo the tree spacing and allow a little more space for the number sculptures for the 1% for Art program that is going to be in the front. And then all the planter shapes were also changed to rectilinear to match. And again, the walls we added as well. Second floor, again, changed the lobby shape to square. We've added the vertical walls both in front and back. And automatic nightshades have always been in the program for the back facade. Just want to make that clear. Third floor. Again, we greatly reduced the bulk size of the third floor to pull it back and divorce it from the lower floors below. We now have we're allowed to have a deck out here that you can walk out onto with some planting. And then the stone, the ceramic quartz tile that is on the lower floors and on the side of the elevator is now also brought in on this entire volume. So the courtyard now has one additional material from the lower floors. Here's the view along the Kelly Moore side. We accentuated the elevator tower as a vertical design element, and we have clad it both inside the lobby spaces as well as outside with the ceramic quartz tile to really accentuate as a vertical stone element. We've also added this entrance canopy with a little more dynamic version with the angled posts to further call out the main entrance. Again, corner theme, vocabulary of the third floor. Again, you can see the corner windows that we've now created. We pushed all the windows on the third floor into the corners and added the mullions. We also tried to play with the horizontal bands and the way that they and the canopies overlap these stone walls. So some go a couple feet, some go 4, 5, 6 feet to try to get a more dynamic diagonal that is more in keeping with what's happening at the stair elevation on the south side. And then also the vertical mullions and the edges of these vertical walls tie usually directly to something that's happening above and below. So this wall here is directly related to the wall above. This mullion is directly related to the wall above. Over at the garage, this edge of the wall and this mullion are related to the garage entrance below. This mullion up here is directly below the wall above. Okay. Again, this lobby is now in keeping with the architecture of the third floor, and it's hard to tell, but it's the yellow accent color that matches this side over here. Again, here you can see the planting on the third floor a little better. And we did, again, reintroduce stone on this entire volume here. We treated this whole thing as a big stone volume and used the base to tie all the stone vertical walls together, and the stone goes all the way up the side of the stair, which we can see better here. So the stone going up the side of the stair provides a really nice contrast to the cement plaster of the stair and really even emphasizes this dynamic stair line even more. We also added the corner glass theme here at this inset for consistency. And next. And on the rear elevation, again, you can see the vertical walls that we've added. They correspond to openings in the garage now below as well. And they also correspond to things happening on the third floor. So this wall they're aligned with the 2 decks on these sides. This wall is aligned with the pop out here. And then we also brought this the aesthetic sunshade line through the vertical wall sections here in the back. It's also true at the front in order to kind of reduce the height of these to break up that wall. Okay. And again, that's really what the neighbors will see. And nothing has changed in the courtyard except for the reduced lobby height, which we don't actually have a rendering of, and the on the other side, but everything else is the same. So again, I'll just quickly go through these so you can remember what they look like. All right.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I'll open the public hearing. We have one card from the public, Mr. Buchanan, and if anyone else wishes to speak, please provide us with a card, and Mr. Buchanan will give you 3 minutes to address the board. There's a remote microphone for you to use here. Since we don't have a light for you today, I'll just probably warn you when you get to 30 seconds.
Believe it or not, I'll try to be brief, and I'm glad to see Amy here because I see her. I think she is a key pivot point on this project. I find it frustrating to come to talk to you because you are not really equipped or empowered to address the parking impact upon neighborhoods. So I apologize for taking your time, but this is the only place to introduce some issues that need to flow on up to the next city council. I would like to take exception to one sentence in the report having to do with the parking adjustment request, and it basically says this is supportable since staff has determined 91 spaces would be adequate to serve all the proposed uses on this site without creating an off-site parking impact. My first question, and I hope could be answered even in discussion or retrospectively, because I think it does need to find its way to the next council. What principle is being used to form that conclusion? And why is it not in the report so that people can be engaged, can prepare a counterpoint to that finding? I am not an architectural expert, but I have become the most qualified, non-professional parking expert. I can't conceive of any principle that could say there's not some reasonable chance that people will take off-site parking just for a matter of preference. They are in a hurry. A visitor will take advantage of an open parking space on the streets. I didn't bring my maps, but I've got exquisite mapping from Park Avenue to West Meadow. And when you look at the density of parked vehicles around that site, there is really no plausible explanation except when some people will park on the street, it is simply going to displace people down the street. So that's the conversation that needs to happen at some point. I don't think this is particularly the best spot, but I think we're leaving just assumptions that the staff report is complete. And I don't blame Amy and the staff for doing that because this is a traditional way to present projects. And the question is, how do we break some tradition? Let me finish up with one thing.
30 seconds.
I'm glad Amy's here because both of us were in the AOL auditorium when Ray Paul presented his project, and before he withdrew it or was retracted. But he said something that I have not heard from any developer to the neighbors who the neighbors were there. He says, you don't want I'm paraphrasing him, you don't want this type of project unless you have residential permit parking, because I can't contain my tenants, because that project also was fairly severely underparked openly. But I think that's the pivot point that we're missing. Now, I don't know if Amy remembers that, but I remember it vividly. And of course, it's not recorded, unfortunately. But Ray Paul said, my projects, which are all densely infilling,
You could wrap up, please.
that it depends upon permit parking. And that's the gap we have between the people, the council, and the staff. And it's just ironic, if you pick up Diana Diamond's editorial or comments today, it speaks about the gap that we have. And I hope we can begin to fill that as opposed to have this rather contentious assertions of what the hell we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will move to Architectural Board questions of the applicant and staff. So, Board Member Guyer, that's right here. All right. Board Member Malone Pritchard.
No questions.
Board Member Liu.
Well, I will.
I have a question for staff about parking then. So I know that the parking adjustment is a director's level decision, right? It's not the board's purview. And then my understanding is that there are a couple factors. One, on this particular project, is mixed use, and there's not designated parking for the apartments. So the idea is to share this. So the theory is that residents go off to work, that parking space is vacant, and it could be used by office workers. And then magically, at 6 o'clock or whatever, everybody switches. So that's the idea of shared use. The affordable housing program also allows for other parking adjustments, but my understanding is that that's not being requested on this particular project, but other projects could.
There is a parking reduction due to the BMR housing on
For
this
the
project.
visitor-
It's 3 spaces.
That's the visitor spaces.
Correct.
But it's not the. But I would just say, like, the affordable housing projects. I mean, they could actually it's actually a reduced ratio, right?
Yes, and I think
that's
part of the
not-
parking reduction is 1 space as a result of that.
Sorry, I have to double check this off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, Palo Alto is 1.5 spaces for a 1-bedroom, and you're allowed 1 space. So we have so it is 1 space. We have 2 1-bedrooms. But regardless, even if we did the full Palo Alto parking for the residential and didn't take anything for the affordable housing credit, we would still be under the amount that we're allowed to take off because of shared use.
And so, just a question for staff: is there a way to apply, sort of suggest the methodology of the mixed-use parking, or, for example, like what would happen? So, like, some of the neighborhood, the neighbors may be concerned about this, and how would they communicate with the director? Is it just going direct? I mean, there's no hearing or anything for the parking adjustment, or you're saying it's here?
So this item will actually go on to City Council, so there's an additional opportunity beyond this hearing to discuss parking. But certainly we invite and encourage anyone to discuss this issue with staff in advance of that hearing so that they are more informed. Clearly the speaker here may not be aware of the intense and detailed analysis that staff has conducted in order to determine that the parking is adequate. There was a time of day study conducted to determine whether or not the requested exception for parking would be acceptable, and we have determined that it is. So it's not something that we just overlooked or a matter of policy of just granting these things without looking at them. It's been looked at very closely, and there is analysis to back up our finding.
Hopefully this works too. So again, as Russ noted, and again, for the public's knowledge, this is going to be a staff report to the City Council, and topics such as parking will be covered in that report. And certainly if it's the desire of the public to see the parking adjustment documentation that the applicant submitted and the methodology, that can be available. We can certainly talk about it in the CMR that goes to the City Council, if that is something that's desired.
All right, so with that, we'll return around for comments or perhaps a motion.
Well, actually, I'm very pleased with what I see here, and based on all the various things we've gone through, I can approve or let it go forward based on what I see here.
All All right, Board Member Malone-Pritchard.
First, I'd like to disclose that I did have a telephone call with the applicant after the prior hearing just to clarify my comments. I'm also very pleased with what I see here overall. I think the project is definitely approvable now, and thank you for making those changes. I particularly like what you've done with the elevator, or removing the tower and just having the elevator come up, and the way you've handled that mass with the materials is very well done. I appreciate the staggered horizontal fins, the entry awnings, and the integration of the third floor and over the floors above. And I also noticed that more dense mullion pattern on the end, sort of bookending the building. I found that very pleasing. And you've improved the rear wall composition and detailing. So all in all, well done.
Board Member Liu.
Great, so thank you for the changes. And I'd say just in general on this project, when I look at sheet A2, which is like your site context photos, that the general strategy of having like a long, low building is actually, to me, it's compatible with the multifamily buildings on Sheridan. And I think like the staff findings are sort of saying that this is a fairly eclectic area and there isn't something cohesive, but I actually think that there is some sort of general overall massing thing, even though it is, you know, the buildings are different colors and materials and whatnot. And I think that there was something to the curve of your tower that kind of related to Sheraton or whatever, but I think generally you don't have the conflict of the horizontal and the verticals. So anyway, I'm in general support of the project. I still have like nitpicky details in my mind about these are all minor, but like I'm not crazy about the two different kinds of windows that you have in the lobby. It seems kind of strange to me. Like if you're inside the lobby looking out, it seems kind of odd to me. When I was at the site yesterday looking at the sidewalk paving, how that would relate to the projects on either side of your project, it seemed like this was like yet a third sidewalk or fourth sidewalk on this very crazy street, and I would kind of like it to go maybe one way or the other. And it's hard because it's I mean, it seems like the county has control over sort of the roadway width and whatnot. But it just seemed kind of crazy to do different sidewalk per project on Page Mill. There is, I think, some details like that are missing. So say like you have a fence detail for the back, or you don't have a fence. You're showing a new fence on the back, and not on the sides, as I'm correct. There's no detail, and then also you have like these very narrow side yards, and you're not showing any gate or whatnot. And I would think that would be normally fenced off. And then I think my other little nitpicky detail was on the stone tile here, which is, I think this is very nice. I'm normally hesitant about something this scale going up 2 stories, especially commercial floors. The synthetic materials are all great, and but usually they're so modular that once you start going up really high, to me they start looking fake, and it's just because they're all perfectly modular. Like if you're real stone, there'd be more variation in the size. So that's just a nitpicky thing. We've seen this kind of thing on like the Walgreens building on University Avenue, and I think it looks fine when it's like this high, and then when it goes up like a whole story, it still looks okay. It starts to look thin, and then 2 stories, it seems to me a bit of a stretch for that particular pattern. And then my last question then was in the conditions of approval, there was some question mark about a loading zone, a commercial loading zone, presumably on Page Mill, and the county is saying that you can't do it and that you have to try to use one of your neighbors' lots if there's a truck delivery or something, and I was wondering what the resolution was on that, on the truck parking. I think that's all that I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Liu. Sidewalk width. Public Works is completely dictating what's happening there, and they want larger sidewalks. These sidewalks that are existing in front of, well, the houses now is only 30 inches wide, so obviously ours is 8 feet wide. They're not going to make Kellymore or AT&T or, redo their sidewalks at this point. I mean, I think if the animal hospital, if they do a project, then that's when they kind of have everybody redo, but they're trying to all go in this direction, but we're somewhat forced into what we have here. Fence detail. We are doing a new fence at the back, and new fences at the side. So it's all new fences. We're not leaving anything existing. Loading space. That was worked out with transportation. We were not allowed to use Page Mill in any way, shape, or form to pull a truck over. So they wanted basically all trucks are going to be forced to pull over on Ash, if I remember correctly from the traffic report. And then basically they're going to have to dolly everything in if they can't use a small truck and go into the garage directly.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? So there's street parking there now, right? And I know that some of the neighbors wanted that removed for sightlines issues, and the fire department has some issues about staging areas, I think. So what is all that extra space? So there's like 8 feet of parking. So what do we know what the county is?
So the county wants no parking on Page Mill. I think they were a little shocked actually when they came out to a site meeting. We had to find out that there was still parking on Page Mill, and they have every intention of removing it all the way down for everybody. So and then in the future, there is going to be a widening of Page Mill, and that loading space or that parking space now is actually going to become a lane, because they're going to take a lane from the eastbound direction and give it to the turning lane for people turning onto El Camino going southbound, if that makes sense. So they're going to shift the roadway closer to our building to put one lane of traffic on the other side of the road, and they're taking our parking for an actual lane of traffic, plus actually a couple feet of the entire Page Mill. They're going to slice it off. So when that project gets funded and done, they'll probably do sidewalks and all sorts of things at that point as well.
Side yard gates?
Sorry, side yard gates. We weren't putting any in. I mean, frankly, from a fire standpoint, we want to make sure if there's ever a fire in a building and people are in the back of the building that they can run out, while we could put gates with panic hardware. We currently weren't showing any. We have been told there is a homeless issue in the neighborhood, and so in future we might have to put some in, but at the current time we weren't trying to wall off our building and make it unfriendly.
And that's all I have at this time.
All right, terrific. It sounds like we're coming to some consensus here about this. This is great. I too am very pleased with what I'm seeing overall. The organization of the building and the design is so dramatically improved, and I really I want to just identify my appreciation for your hearing us and responding. And I think what you're seeing today is that you've moved in the right direction. So very pleased for that. The rhythm of the building and the lobby elevator volume and all of these pieces are really coming together in a nice way. I personally think the pendulum might have swung just a little too far with the lobby entry, and that it's almost too subtle at this point. But I don't really have a problem with it. I think two-dimensionally, when we look at the elevations, it's hard to read, but the three-dimensional views show enough of a statement there that I don't find that problematic. Most of the comments the other board members have made, I very much agree with, and the one point that I wanted to address was the comment by board member Liu in regard to the tile and the character of that. And I'd like to suggest that there might be a base and a middle to this building. as there already is a top. And very often we'll see an applicant come in with rusticated material at the base of the building and something that's a little more refined as it moves up, and both in surface texture and also potentially in scale of the material. And so I'd like to suggest that there's one more refinement that might occur in regard to the tile and the style of that tile. I did notice that the LE sheets in the set are not updated. They still show the rounded lobby, and it's my expectation that the lighting will be similar and will function the same way. And I don't really have a problem with that, but I just want to make sure that we point out that the drawings need to get corrected and come forward with the right information. I want to address the issue of the gates. I think that while I very much appreciate your approach and I understand the concerns about fire, our role is to help control the aesthetics and to make sure that things are done properly. I would prefer to see you show gates on the drawings, show the details for those gates and the placement of them, and indicate them as optional future, something like that, so that we can predict and control where they go versus not having control over that and it just occurring at some later date. So that would be perhaps a suggestion. Really the only comments that I had at this point. I wanted to ask a quick question of staff. The art program, what is the status of that? Where does that go from here? Does that come back to us at all, or do we that just goes to the Public Art Commission?
Public
correct?
Art Commission would be weighing in, and I guess in this case making a recommendation to council on the art pieces.
Okay, so is the public art attached to the building in any way? Is it affixed, or is it a standalone?
It's standalone. It's on the sidewalk, and I'll actually have a slide in the back. It was from the first presentation and hasn't changed, so
Okay.
we'll go
So
find
no
it.
update on that.
Yeah, there we go. They are folded square numbers, about 30 inches square, and they're going to be up on little 24-inch platforms, and they'll be right on the sidewalk in between the two benches.
Great. All right, we'll look forward to seeing that. That'll
Yeah,
be
and
fun.
so that was approved. That went through preliminary, and the Art Commission loved it. And it's just we just have to go back to them with the exact colors and exact spacing, and then we're done. But at this point, my understanding is they're the ones that. But we already saw them, and we passed the preliminary, and they liked this. They approved this plan, and we just need to go back with the exact details.
Great.
And the money.
I'm excited about that as well. Looks great. So with that, I'll close the public hearing and just look to the board to see if anyone is open to making a motion.
Before we make a motion, I have a couple of housekeeping items. Looking in the DEE findings, I think one of the findings needs to be revised a little bit. If I can find them. Okay, so finding number 1, a lot of the stuff about the tower was taken out, but it does say the footprint spans the entire site, resulting in an expansive roof capped at a restrictive 35-foot height limit. I think that portion should be struck because that has nothing to do with the DEs that are now being requested. And in the context-based design criteria findings, finding number 2, street building facades, mentions there are 3 commercial doors to the retail spaces when actually there are only 2. And then the last thing is in the conditions of approval from planning. Condition number 9 mentions that the public art is being handled by an in lieu fee, so that condition should be struck.
I caught one other thing, which is under section 4, right? The architectural review findings, number 2. So in the paragraph is the building would be located on a significant arterial roadway where larger commercial buildings are common. And I would say that there's also large residential buildings on Page Mill as well.
All right, anything else? Anyone prepared to construct a motion here or have other comments?
I have a question for staff. If we've seen this three times, right? So we have to make a motion today, right? And then if we want other things to come back, is it okay for us to have them come to subcommittee, or is that considered a fourth meeting? It's not gonna, okay, great, thank you.
It's my understanding that the 3 and out is more of a guideline. It's not a rule. We have the ability to, at the board's discretion, continue an item, extend our discussion if we choose to do that. I know that's occurred on projects before. If the applicant is willing.
Yeah, I think the applicant is entitled to a recommendation today. The recommendation is to the council. The applicant, could consent to a continuance. I don't know that that's going to serve this project well. It does need to get to council. We have a tentative date with this council, and it would be probably, if possible, to do some of these design tweaks if they're minor in nature, a consent calendar or subcommittee. If they don't need to be, rectified prior to the council hearing, they could happen afterwards. If you feel that they're important enough to show up on the plans for council, that they'll be into those weeds, we can certainly try to accommodate a subcommittee before that planned date, which I think is December 8th. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Right.
Okay. Let's see, I'd like to propose a recommendation, or recommend to the city council approve the site and design review application as well as the 2 requested design enhancement exceptions for the project at 441 Page Mill Road based on architectural review, design enhancement exception, and context-based design criteria findings, and subject to the conditions in the draft record of land use actions, attachment A. And are there any, you've got a whole list here of things we want to add to that, or?
I would just ask if you could add my 3 revisions to the findings and
Or if you
staff
wanna go ahead and
conditions.
add them at,
Sure. Actually, I will second.
Okay, let's do it that way.
And then I would suggest that we add the revisions that I suggested for the DEE finding, for the context-based findings, and for the conditions of approval findings, and also Alex's revision. That was a conditions of approval finding?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Great. And I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we have the items that we were discussing returned to subcommittee. And those would include evaluation of the stone tile material in its variation in pattern, its texture, the gate design and placement, and an update of the LE sheets.
Also, the C1 sheet that's also.
C1 sheet needs to be updated as well, and great, and an update of the C1 sheet. Will you accept that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I definitely did want it to come back here, so I think the subcommittee would be fine.
Great, and Claire?
I accept that.
Great. So, any further comments? Great, so I think we can take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those not? So that item passes, let's see, that would be 4-0-1-0. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, does anyone feel they need to go put the parking pass on their car? I'm anticipating that this next item won't take us
I'm fine.
to 11 o'clock or 11:30, and
Okay.
that's the 3-hour limit that we would hit, so I think we'll be okay.
So also, if you're in a 3-hour spot, you can't put the permit on your car. You have to move it to a permit spot.
Well, I'm parked in a permit spot, yeah.
Oh, you might want to move
And
your
you
car.
need to go take care of it. Oh, all right.
Okay.
All right, we'll see how that goes. Sorry about that.
Donating to the cause.
Yeah, got a parking ticket my first day at work.
Thank you very much.
First day at work, though,
Yeah.
wasn't it? But you didn't have your sticker.
Thanks, Norm. Great job.
Made the difference, not so much, okay.
All right, so we'll move on to our next item, which is the Build to Standard Ordinance. And for that, we will, let's see, where are my notes? Sorry, Great. So item 2 is the Build to Standard Ordinance. Review of draft modifications to the Build to line requirements in the Palo Municipal Code, Chapter 1816. This item was discussed by the ARB in a public hearing on October 2014, and continued to this date for further discussion. This item was reviewed by Planning and Transportation on July 30th, 2014, and continued to a date uncertain. So, staff presentation, please.
We don't have the same rule for this kind of thing that we do for applications for development projects, in other words. Am I not on? Oh, boy, okay. No, I'm good. I just I didn't know there was a light involved. And belly up to the mic, okay. So, yes, I am not sure, you know, I haven't been counting lately how many times we have been wrestling with an ordinance change. I know we wrestled with a sidewalk change, and that went to the council on June 2nd, and they said, what are you dealing with sidewalks for? So we go to the build to line and look at that, because that's where we're getting these DEEs to allow people to set back further from the street. So we did a surgical operation to the code with some annotated amendments the last time we met. The ARB noted that it was a reasonable set of changes. There was a final clarification that has been introduced into this copy that you have in your report, which says, upon request of the applicant, this is to make it abundantly clear that the applicant's choice is very much involved as to what they propose, whether it's as crystal clear as it can be. As all of our codes, the question comes up, is it crystal clear as it can be? And the answer is usually no, and that's where the planners come in and help the applicants to interpret the code. So what I would say is, I've got this going to the Planning Commission on November 12th. Excuse me. The Planning Commission, I don't know what they're going to do with it. What I do know is there's already been discussion of incorporating further study into the comprehensive plan update going forward in the new year regarding El Camino, in particular the sidewalk, and having a look. I know other cities have done specific plans. I picked up Mountain View's specific plan the other day. Alex Liu, the board member Liu, referenced it at the last meeting. There are certainly ways to get comprehensive about looking at the roadway and all of the sites and the varying sizes and what that means. There's also certainly a path to have a further discussion on heights of buildings with respect to setbacks. And that, I think, goes into that comp plan discussion. I know that was brought up last time as, some thoughts Chair Lippert brought those thoughts up, and I tried to capture those in the bullets in the report. Hopefully you had a chance to review those and remember what that discussion was about. We did have a brief meeting. Vice Chair Pop and Board Member Lou and I met and looked at some images for a hotel and variations there too. And Alex, if you want to talk to that more, you can. But you know, again, it's a tough thing to try to, in a long-winded effort, to try to show what we're trying to do with an ordinance. It takes a lot of time, and so we haven't really been able to capture images that show exactly what we're doing with this. The whole intent of this ordinance is to loosen the build to line, to remove it from Middlefield and San Antonio, where it's also in play today, and the side streets of El Camino and the other side streets, and just leave it on El Camino, add it to the CC2 district on El Camino, and focus on loosening the percentage of a building that has to be at that build to line. So I'll just stop there and let the board weigh in.
All right, so let's start off today with the public comment. I don't have any speaker cards at this point, so I'll open and close the public hearing and move back to the board for comments and discussion. Begin with Board Member Liu.
So I'm not very organized today. I apologize. I have a couple follow-ups. One is, I think, Chair Lippert has been talking on several occasions about form-based code. And so I just wanted to show there's an example of a city that is doing that. So Hayward has done that for Mission Boulevard. Mission Boulevard is like El Camino. It was a state highway. They were able to get it undesignated as a state highway. And they've got like $100 million roadway project under construction, and then they've done like a specific plan for all of the parcels, and then they're using a form-based code by one of the followers of Andre Twainy, Plater Zyberg. And you know, I just skimmed it. I didn't really look at it very carefully. I don't really quite understand how that all works, and it seems to me very difficult to. It seems really difficult for me on my end from how you apply form-based code onto something in Palo Alto where we have very irregular triangular shaped parcels, very long skinny narrow parcels, very wide multi-acre sites. But anyway, I mean, I think it's worth a follow-up. I mean, that's more, it seems like that's more of a PTC thing. But if we're looking at what other cities are doing, Hayward is doing something very different than the other peninsula cities. And then I would say that I did do a quick study of your zoning, you know, on one particular site, and it seemed like it opened up more issues than it resolved as I was working on it. So I'm not quite prepared to show them today, but it's the. I think, as Randy was mentioned, that just on the very, you know, the amount of different kinds of sites is very, very tricky to make a recommendation that we say will work and doesn't remove the issues with DEEs. I mean, I think that's just a fact of life, of just the way the land has been configured on El Camino.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
So I will maintain my narrow focus on what has been put in front of us. And I am in support of the changes that have been made. I do have one comment on, let's see, this is in the mixed-use development standards. No, it's after the mixed-use development standards table. Page that looks like this. In H, it says the ground floor may be set back further, et cetera, to provide more vibrant retail use. I would just say to provide more vibrant use, because it may not be retail something else might be appropriate there. And in the staff report, there was a comment about the prohibition of parking and loading spaces in the first 10 feet adjoining the street property line, and I am in agreement with staff's assessment that that may have some unintended consequences, so I'm not in support of that particular modification to the ordinance.
Board Member Greer.
I agree. I've read all this, and I agree with the minor changes that, in fact, I think are the right way to do it, so I can support this the way it is.
All right, well, I'm struggling with this. You know, I did enjoy the discussion that Amy and Alex and I had, and I continue to believe that this is a very complex and difficult issue beyond what we all really can imagine. Every time you get into an individual site, they become unique in how the regulations apply because of adjacent context, scale and dimension, all of these things. I want to indicate very much my appreciation for the tremendous time and effort that you've put into this. I have to say that I've, you know, over all of the years that I've been in Palo Alto, I've read an awful lot of staff reports, and I think that this is as well done and as thorough and detailed as I've seen, and I really appreciate all of the precision that you've applied here to this. I'm very much in favor of removing the requirements from Middlefield and Alma and these other places, but I'm not sure that El Camino is ready for this in this way. I think that there's a very clear concern from the public that has not been resolved in regards to the concept of a taking, and I don't know that we've completely vetted that. I appreciate all the research that Board Member Liu has performed, and I'm interested to go take a look at this form-based code in Hayward and see what that's about and how we might use that. But my general feeling is still that we're not ready to make these changes, that there is too much collateral around this that we have not considered. And it's rare for me to be accused of someone who slows the process down and doesn't want to just charge forward and make the changes and, you know, we'll work it out and we'll make it happen and it's going to be okay. I think that this is a much too delicate issue to do that with, and I really don't see how we can do this without the full context of the comp plan update. And considering changes to the horizontal footprint of a building without considering changes to the vertical and really being able to involve additional height and massing and how that affects neighborhoods that are within 150 feet, and all of these little pieces that come into play as part of this are not really incorporated enough in this discussion for me to feel comfortable saying, yes, this sounds good, I like where this is, let's move forward with it. So I'm much more inclined to return our recommendation to the Planning and Transportation Commission as indicating that Middlefield and Alma, yes. El Camino, not yet. Middlefield and San Antonio, excuse me. Middlefield and San Antonio, yes, and El Camino, not yet. And to continue to process applications through the DEE process where we are looking at each one individually and we are evaluating context and we're working as a board to resolve this. It's been done for years, and we could do it for another year if we needed to, and I don't think that we are going to suffer severely from it. The goal of incentivizing property owners on El Camino to improve their projects and to take steps to renovate buildings that are beyond their useful life is important, and we want to make that happen, but we want to make it happen within a set of constraints that are controllable and fair and valid and achieve what we're hoping to achieve. And I don't think we have enough discussion around that yet to move forward with that. So that's where I stand on this. Any other comments or discussion, please?
Yeah, part of it is that, as you said, I agree with you, but it's one of these things that in something like this, I don't think you'll ever get that. I mean, all those answers. So, I mean, it just about has to be done one building at a time. But I think some of what I like about this is that this gives an applicant somewhat of a framework as to, where we're headed with this. That doesn't mean that this needs to be a final end-all, that says it will be done like this and that's it, that it's black and white. I mean, let's put it this way, if it wasn't for the fact that everything was gray, we wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, if everything was that black and white, it would just be, it's either on the left or on the right or black or white, and that would be a done deal. So I think this is a step in the right direction, and if City Council really is looking for something black and white or whatever, that this is a step in the right direction, and I could accept this like this, but I agree with you that until as you said, the height is taken into account based on the horizontality of it. There'll never be or I should say, those things really do affect each other. But I also know from past experience that height is a real big issue to people. That just because we may think that height should be a variation in some, that it's more that it's acceptable to have heights or higher. Heights in certain locations, a lot of people aren't. And so I think this is a step in the right direction. Is this the end all? No, I don't think so. But, if we've been requested to come up with something a little bit more black and white than what we had before, I think this is doable.
I agree with what Robert says, and also want to point out that the build-to line still exists here on El Camino. So if an applicant wants to build to the build-to line, they can do that. So if there's an issue and they're not able to get the square footage they want by not building to the build-to line, they have the opportunity to still use that line. So I don't really see what the issue is with pushing this forward, because people can continue with the ordinance exactly the way it is if they want to. And then if they don't like it, then we're saying, that's fine. You can pull your building back further if you want to, and now you don't have to ask for a DEE to do it. And having worked on buildings in El Camino, I know it's actually a challenge to get your building pushed that close to the sidewalk. Sometimes you don't want to.
Let me do one more thing, is that, and I agree that usually we make, we sit here and make these modifications and we make them tighter. This one is actually, we're going in the opposite direction. So if somebody still wants to do the extreme end, or as you call it, then we haven't really, disavowed that. But I think this is something in the right direction.
Can we just go over the build-to provision in the table? It seems like it's been modified. We've modified it a couple times, and I'm just trying to think of, make sure that it's clear to me, because it was the way that I was thinking about it in my head is it's a little bit different, right? So, okay, so one is.
Sorry,
Yes.
just to get us all oriented, are you looking at table 3 or table 4? Mixed use or?
Should they not? Well, I was looking at table 4, but we can look at
it's
table 3.
mixed use.
Are they different? I mean,
Slightly.
theoretically, they should be similar. Well, why don't we start with 3?
Well, I think the build to, yes, just the build to regulation is exactly the same in both of those.
Yeah. Okay. So when we table 3, right? Goal that a minimum of 50% of frontage built within the setback range of 0 to 10 feet from the property line, which is different than the curb, right? So that's 8 to 18 feet from the curb.
Yeah, I think 0 to 10 feet from the property line is pretty much the same thing as 8 to 18 feet from the curb, because typically the property line is 8 feet from the curb. And then if you know, another 10 feet back from that becomes 18 feet.
Okay. And then there's footnote 7 is about driveway aisles. So we're just saying that that doesn't count?
No,
Or it's allowed? It's
you can have a 25-foot driveway access, regardless of what it says here, of how much of a building frontage you have to put. You know,
You
if
can
it
always
says put
put in-
50% and you have a small lot, you can't do a
Right,
50%.
okay. I get
right.
it. Okay. Okay, the second item is 33% of side street build to setback, and that's being striked out. And then I think the example I think we were using is the mixed-use project on El Camino and Portage, right, where they actually they needed to push the building back farther from the build-to line for a handicap ramp because the grade sloped, right? It's not, sites are not perfectly flat.
Right, so they asked for a DEE from the side street, and this would eliminate that occurrence.
Okay. Bullet point 3, upon request of the applicant, the wall percentage can be via upper floors where the ground floor is set back farther. So this is where I got a little confused. So you're saying farther than 18 feet? Or farther than the 12? See, my thinking of it was
Farther
before
than
was
the
farther
build-to
than the
line.
12 feet, right? The
Yes.
12-foot effective
Yes,
setback.
I think it's the build-to line that is currently in place now, before changes, that says you need to provide a 12-foot effective sidewalk, which we're not touching. So there's a 12-foot effective sidewalk,
Right, okay.
and that's where the lower building must be placed, you know, in the current regulations. So this is saying there's flexibility there, that 50% of the building, you know, can be.
Right, so I
can be
think
at
you're
the
saying this
upper
is an
floor.
arcade.
You could have a
arcade-
25% at the lower floor to,
Right.
you know, for some
Okay.
reason.
So it was just not clear. I think I understood it as the build-to line, and then I was just reading this straight thing. I was thinking, oh, it could be set back further from your 18-foot or 10 feet. From the build-to line. Yeah. Okay, and then bullet point 4 is upon request of the applicant, the wall percentage may be reduced based on context-based design criteria set forth in Chapter 18.16 of this code and the site context, including land use, adjacent building context, lot size, and building design. So I guess in my mind, like the, 636 Waverly, I mean, in my mind, I was the only one who thought this, but I thought that that building should be pushed back to match the context. I mean, it was this, if an applicant wanted to do that, at the moment, they couldn't, right? Well, this is a different zone, so maybe I shouldn't use that project, but.
The concept of an applicant wanting to go further back, that's by their request.
Right.
And in this case, it's the percentage of the wall. Instead of 50%, they want to put, I mean, it's a minimum of 50%. What if they have 49%? They can do 49%. It's upon the request of the applicant. We don't have to make them do a DEE to put 49%, like we did on Middlefield, which does have the build-to line with the Samyama yoga place.
Yes, that's a good example.
Where they had to get a DEE because it was something less than 50%.
Right, and then we have a lot of gray area, and I think on that project there were a lot of gray areas. Does a porch count as the build-to line, or does it not?
Right. Yeah. Where do
'Cause that would
we
be
count it? Is
right.
it the canopy? Is it the wall? What is it that we're counting?
Okay. Okay, I mean, I think I can support this. I mean, obviously to Randy, I mean, that there's more work to be done on this, and that this would probably be potentially changed again after, who knows whatever happens after a comp plan update and zoning, I mean, potentially. Right. Right.
Ask just a quick question of how you interpret the width of the driveway, this 25-foot width of the driveway. How is that factored into the equation?
Well, again, if there's a small lot, we can't say, in the current code, we can't say you must have a building at the build-to line over 50% of that frontage distance, and have a driveway that complies with in and out, driving. It's a small lot. You need to be able to. They by right they get a 25-foot wide driveway to get in and out of the property. It's a taking otherwise.
Mhm.
So that's where the existing code, they could go in and build a 30%, of the frontage as a building, and then have a 25-foot wide driveway on a smaller lot. That's a right.
Okay.
At this point with the code, and that's not to be changed with this.
Okay. Well, I'm open to suggestions about what the board would like to do in order to move this forward. Does anyone have a particular recommendation?
I think we ought to go ahead and move forward with the, pretty much the knowledge that things are going to change. This is not going to be set in stone for the next 20 years, that, as you said, based on what may happen next year, we may be revisiting this again, but I think for right now, we're doing it what the request of what the city council has asked us to do.
Fine with that.
So I move that we recommend that this move to Planning Commission, as written with the following revisions. One is that in both tables, the item that Alex was mentioning regarding the wall percentage at the ground floor setback further from the build-to line be clarified.
And then your note on H.
My note on... Yes, my note on H, setback is established to provide more vibrant use. So strike retail from that sentence. And to strike footnote 10 from table 4, that is the parking or loading space not being allowed in the first 10 feet adjoining the street side yard.
Due to unintended consequences that have not been.
Indeed, due to possible
Explored.
unintended consequences.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Would you have any discussion about your motion? About your second? All right. Any other comments? We'll take a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So that passes 4-0-1-0. Chair Lever absent. Thank you very much. So, moving through our agenda, then I don't have any board or staff announcements, updates, reports, or comments at this point. And so, unless anyone has anything they want to bring up at this point, I think we'll close the hearing for today. There are no subcommittee items. And
I should make one announcement. There are no subcommittee items, true, but next meeting, next week, we do have subcommittee items. And I just noticed that Lee Lippert was due to stop his subcommittee term on October 16th. Well, he's still on the board.
I'll let him do it for his last
Okay.
great. So we'll ask Chair Lippert to attend one
Okay,
last subcommittee meeting.
And that also goes for Claire Malone Pritchard, as long as it's not a Stanford item, because you're, Claire, you're noted to be stopping as of last week on subcommittee duty. So,
Not just subcommittee,
yeah.
everything.
Well, that too.
But here I am, so I will do
Yeah,
subcommittee
so
if called upon.
Are you willing to do it one
Randy-
more meeting?
or Randy
One more.
All right.
Okay.
We'll let you do that. And then I think the intent was that I would roll on to subcommittee
Once there's a new board.
once there's a new
Yes.
board, and we would
So we'll say
elect one
20th.
of the new board members to join the subcommittee at that point.
What they don't know won't hurt them.
Right.
I would just advise it's usually better not to put a new member on because they'll be looking at items that
They haven't
they haven't seen before. So
the-
usually we
the
hold
issue
off a
with
few
this
months.
was that we had gone on without a calendar for quite some time, and I had served for something like a year and a couple months on subcommittee without stopping, and then board member Lou had an unusually long stint on the subcommittee as well, and so the
It's
thought
easier
was,
doing that than being chair.
what's that?
It's easier being on the subcommittee than being chair again.
Okay. So are you suggesting that you'd come back to the subcommittee, or? I think that's what I heard, Alex. Are you offering to participate in the subcommittee again? Perhaps what we'll do is, since I had done this before, why don't I go back and take a look at the calendar and try and construct something for new member A and new member B, and we'll do just a partial term for board member Lou in the subcommittee this time to bridge a period of time until they get their sea legs, and then we can roll someone on, and I'll stay on for a while.
I mean, it's, usually it terms, what, around 3 months, something like that?
It was about 4.
You know, Alex and I could split the first term or something, so the person gets a full, in other words, he takes it for,
Till
I
January
don't
or
know, 4
something.
meetings, and I take it for 4 meetings, and then we put somebody new in.
Thank you. I'll construct it in that manner then. That's great.
Okay, that's fine.
That's probably the easiest way, because, like I said, I know when I first got on here, obviously, it is a whole lot easier and more, you know, or less formal in the subcommittee, but still, and as you said, the main criteria is not having seen any of the, you know, probably what's being brought forward, and you're being thrown in, okay, here, all I need is this final, you want it blue or green, to, you know, type
And you have to
thing.
go study.
Right.
Exactly.
For a
so,
week
right.
to, yeah,
Right.
bone up on it.
So that's great. I think we'll move forward in that manner, and
Say November to January and then January to March or
something like that.
And
Yeah,
then
something
we'll
like
put
that.
the person in, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And the new
Well, let
member.
us take a stab since it's just next week. You'll see it here and then you can say.
Do you want to go ahead and do that?
I'll just, yeah.
Okay, great.
just and then you
All
can
right.
say.
So with that, then I think we are adjourned.